following is a presentation of KSL Sports. Hello, Cougar Nation.
Top of the key, triple, Richie Saunders, fourth three-pointer of the night, massive make.
Every Monday night, we break down the Cougars' last game and look ahead to next week. Cougar Nation, brought to you by Central Bank. Here's BYU insider Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio.
Good evening, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into your show as BYU basketball is flying high after a historic week knocking off two blue blood programs, Kansas and Arizona. And we're discussing all of it right here over the next hour here on the legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio. Mitch Harper, Matt Baiamonte with you. And Matt, these are the times when, Cougar fans are feeling good about life because that was an epic week for BYU hoops.
So long are the days of Loyola, Marymount, and Pepperdine, Mitch. We're talking blue bloods, victories. This is what BYU fans always wanted, and Kevin Young and company are delivering a memorable season for Cougar Nation.
It was an incredible week for BYU basketball, and it has us asking the question, was that the greatest week in BYU basketball history? Load up the phone lines, 801-575-8255. Again, 801-575-8255. Share your thoughts, or you can also weigh in on anything regarding BYU basketball. We're going to have a special caller coming in at the bottom of the hour, Kanon Catchings, heralded freshman, going to be joining us here at the bottom of the hour to discuss his performance in Arizona. But right now, we got to get to our takeaways from that big week.
Cougar Nation takeaways. Mitch and Matt analyze BYU's last week of play and what it means for the next week.
I'll start things off, Mitch. One of many takeaways, and there are a lot of positive takeaways from that win against Arizona, but I came away from that game feeling like Kevin Young, BYU's coach, is already one of the elite coaches in the Big 12. I thought his substitution patterns were exceptional. I thought he drew up some outstanding plays out of timeouts to get easy points. I kind of felt like him coming from the NBA, this team would be better situationally, but I didn't think it would be to this level. It is incredible what he's done with this group and the changes he has made throughout the season. There's been a lot of subtle tweaks from non-conference play to the start of Big 12 play to where we're at now, where this team continues to improve. He's been fantastic, and he's far exceeded my expectations, and I think he's already one of the best coaches in the conference.
BYU, took Arizona's best shot, literally, from Arizona on the offensive end. Arizona scores 95 points, and, Tommy Lloyd himself, Arizona head coach, admits that they're not the greatest offensive team. BYU gives up 95, yet they go back and forth in a high-level scoring game, and they put up 96, and they win that game. I just think that's significant because, Matt, you look at maybe some of the history of BYU basketball and BYU football too. When you pull off a big upset, if you're BYU, particularly on the road, maybe that team that was the odds-on favorite just underperforms to what they usually do. Arizona was, in many respects, the best version of themselves, especially on the offensive end, and BYU still won that game, and that's pretty impressive stuff by BYU, and the toughness of BYU to keep battling really stood out to Kevin Young.
It's a bad call. I mean, whatever. What am
I just felt like whoever was going to kind of get the last stop was going to win. And, we did some things better in the second half, particularly less turnovers. As physical as they are, for us to go +4 on second chance points when we're undersized against their size, I thought that just really spoke to our toughness in that game, and that's ultimately what won it, was just sheer toughness.
He's not wrong, Mitch. That was an incredibly gritty and tough performance. I thought they started the game rebounding very well. It got away from them a little bit, where Arizona ended up out-rebounding them by 11. But to win that game, considering the rebounding margin, was impressive for BYU. Another takeaway for me, Mitch, is I thought BYU's bench points was fantastic. 30 points off the bench. Kanon Catchings, who we'll have at the bottom of the hour, he played a big role in that. And then shout out to Trey Stewart, man. This dude has been through a lot. He played 18 minutes. He played more minutes than Trevin Knell, who started the game. Trey Stewart was a weapon defensively in that game. And no play was maybe more important, Mitch, Then on that final play with less than 3 seconds left, Trey Stewart completely stonewalls and denies Caleb Love from even getting the ball, because Caleb Love this year has made a half-court shot at the buzzer. Like, if he gets that thing off and gets to half-court, it could very well go in. And the way that Caleb Love was playing in that second half, who knows what could have happened. He had 17 points in the second half, and for Trey Stewart to take him away, that it eventually leads to a turnover, and Richie throws it up in the air. But this bench play is outstanding, and it's becoming a real weapon for this team at the right time.
I like that point. BYU takes down Arizona 96-95. It completes a week of consecutive back-to-back wins for BYU for the first time since 1988. That was against Wyoming and UTEP. Now, with all due respect to those teams back in the old WAC, I think it slaps a little different when you're taking down Kansas and you're taking down Arizona. It was one of the great weeks in BYU basketball history. And another takeaway for me, this BYU team is gaining momentum at season's end, similar to the one 5 years ago in the first year under Mark Pope. That team reeled off a 9-game winning streak to close out the season. You know, this group is on a 4-game winning streak, winners of their 8 of their last 10. Now they're ranked in the AP Top 25 at number 25. There's just a lot of momentum building for this team, and that's exciting because we've talked about it throughout the entire season on this show. Play your best basketball in March. Well, this coming Saturday is March, and BYU is looking like the best versions of themselves.
Mitch, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room, which is that foul call that led to Richie Saunders scoring. I did not have a problem with it. Now, I don't know that it was a foul. I think it was a bang-bang play. It could have gone either way. I think the reason I'm okay with the call ultimately is on the previous possession, Caleb Love got a whistle on a very similar ticky-tack soft foul. And if that's the way you're going to call it down the stretch, then that's fine. It just needs to be equal. And we've come on here before and talked about frustrations with Big 12 officiating. I don't think it was that bad in that game. And I thought it was pretty fair. It was pretty consistent. Yeah, did BYU benefit from the whistle? Sure. But BYU has also been in that position before, Mitch, where they don't make those free throws and they lose that game. They did that right up the street at the Huntsman Center. They had a chance to win the game at the free throw line. They didn't do it. So credit to Richie and BYU for making a play. I don't know. I just don't feel like it was that controversial of a call if you had watched that entire game and seen how those plays were being called down the stretch.
Yeah, I thought it was in the moment. I felt like BYU got away with one. But then, of course, what happens on social media, similar to the Utah football game, which was one of the worst weeks ever on social media, where everyone was acting like an officiating expert with these grainy iPhone videos and all these different angles. Yep. We're seeing that now with BYU and Arizona. Trey Townsend fouled Richie Saunders. I'm with you. I think that ultimately there was a lot of consistencies. I think just what becomes a bigger storyline is that Tony Padilla, the official in the game, he's like a household name among Big 12 fans. And even former players like Nick Emery going to social media, sounding off on Tony Padilla, where he was located on the court. Is he the guy that should be calling that? Look, Tommy Lloyd, Arizona head coach, he was obviously not thrilled with it, and he called it, a bad call.
It's a bad call. I mean, like, whatever. What am I going to say? I mean, you hate for a game to be decided by that. Listen, it's the Big 12. That's what I'm told. And the guy who called it's one of the best refs. So, we got to live with it. But step back. They scored 93 points up to that point on our home court.
And there you go. That's the biggest point, is that at the end of the day, Arizona gave up 96 to BYU. And, you don't have anyone else to blame but yourself, Arizona. You were on your home court. You were the favorite. You allow 96 in regulation. I mean, that was a high-level scoring game. Back and forth they went. Both teams just knocking down shots left and right. Arizona has got to get a stop, and they can't just chalk it up to the officials. Don't put yourself in a position where the officials could sway potentially an outcome, but also we're not acknowledging, too, Richie Saunders goes to the foul line and buries the free throws.
Right.
Moments prior, Dallin Hall missed a front end, and I thought, oh, no, Dallin Hall is going to have that similar experience to what Trevin Knell experienced at the Huntsman Center, but now that gets forgotten after Richie stepped up and knocked down 2 clutch free throws.
Well, I also thought if you want to go a little further back in that sequence, Mitch, Caleb Love benefited greatly from the whistle down the stretch. He attacked Keita twice that I thought was just good defensive plays by Keita, a no call. Then there was the three on Trevin Nell where it was very hard to tell on TV if he actually touched Caleb Love. And that was a huge sequence. He was up 4. Caleb Love gets that whistle. He buries all 3 free throws. And then on the other end, Mawot Mag hits a 3. If those free throws don't happen, BYU goes up 7, and they're comfortably in a position to win that game. So if you want to put the microscope on any single call, you can do that, and it can go both ways. But ultimately, I thought BYU made a play. And I also, too, like how Richie Saunders in that moment, the play call was for him. The initial action wasn't there. He said as much post-game. And then he made a play. And this is what Kevin Young had to say on that final play call that got Richie Saunders to the free throw line.
We were in a similar situation, less time on the clock at Utah, and I kicked myself for not having a thing dialed up. And so it's something I've spent a lot of mental time on in that particular situation. The play broke down, but ultimately we wanted to go to Richie, and he was able to make a play.
And that he did. Richie Saunders, the Big 12 Player of the Week this week in the conference. First time a BYU player, men's player, has earned that Player of the Week honor, and this was Richie on hitting those game-winning free throws.
I've practiced that, since I was a little kid in the church gym. That's what I practice. You practice and you hope for moments like that, right? Where you can just step up and shoot those free throws. It's so loud and everything's on the line. That's why you play basketball.
Good stuff there from Richie Saunders, and it is probably got to be the moment that you dream of as a young player. I mean, to get a chance in a historic venue like the McKell Center, Richie Saunders steps up to the line, knocks it down. I think it's safe to say, Matt, that if a game is on the line, BYU is going to Richie Saunders. He's become that go-to guy for the Cougars.
It's hard to believe, but he's playing that way. He deserves those opportunities with his play. I love that he got the Big 12 Player of the Week. Well deserved. Let's take a break, Mitch. On the other side, we'll get to some calls. We'll answer the question, was that the greatest week in the history of BYU basketball? You can call us 801-575-8255. Cougar Nation brought to you by Central Bank, voted best bank and mortgage in Utah Valley. Visit us online at cbutah.com.
How many things affect your life as much as slow traffic and bad weather? Listen tomorrow morning for traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the 9s on KSL News Radio.
Cougar Nation, welcome back in to your show. 801-575-8255. Was this the greatest week in BYU basketball history? It begs that question. When you take down brands like Kansas by 34 points, take down Arizona in the McKell Center, you're flying high. You're in the AP Top 25. You got a player as the Big 12 Player of the Week. Your rival is firing their coach. It's the week of the year for BYU basketball, Matt.
Oh, man. I mean, when you put it that way, it does sound like the best week in the history of BYU basketball. For me, it's close, but I would actually give the week of getting to the Sweet 16 with Jimmer as maybe the best week. And I know that the opponents that they beat weren't as good as these ones, but the magnitude of the moment. And then you consider that was Jimmer kind of continuing on to becoming the Player of the Year, sort of put his team on his back when Brandon Davies got suspended for the rest of that season, and he performed. And to get to the Sweet 16, it's something that's rarely happened for BYU. I felt like the stage was so big then, and that's not to say in the 80s it wasn't. But college basketball, there's a much bigger spotlight on it now than there was in the 80s. I thought that little weekend run where they got to the Sweet 16 was pretty dang significant.
We'll keep talking about that question throughout the show. We're also going to be joined by Kanon Catchings, BYU freshman, who had a big game at Arizona, 14 points for Kanon. He'll be hopping onto the show coming up around 6:35, so stay tuned to that. Of course, Cougar Nation sponsored by Central Bank. Let's get to what's trending up and down with BYU basketball.
Cougar Nation, trending. What's trending up and what's trending down this season?
Let's start with the positives because things are going great down in Cougar country. BYU 96-95 over Arizona, wins over Kansas and Arizona in the week. And now they're the top 25, number 25. You're ranked. BYU Cougars. Trending up for me is Trey Stewart. He's been trending up for weeks, but 18 minutes played, 3 points, and I thought this spoke volumes to how Kevin Young views Trey Stewart right now. He was subbed in on multiple late-game situations. He got subbed in for Jaeger Demon at times, for Dallin Hall at times, for defensive purposes. He has gained the trust of Kevin Young to play meaningful minutes. And I think one thing that has really helped him earn more minutes, Mitch, look, we know the defense is great. The defense is great, but you can't provide nothing offensively. Now, he only takes 3 shots. He goes 1 of 2 from deep, but he's 5 of 10 from deep during this stretch of play where he's been getting more minutes. So he's at least a threat, and he's capable of making a shot. He's put the ball on the floor. He had a nice drive in that game where he drove in and then dumped it over the top to Foose, who got the layup. So he's making plays offensively, and then he's also adding just high-level, tremendous defense. I love what Trey Stewart's doing right now.
It's a good poll. For me, I really like what Kevin Young's staff did as far as adjustments in the second meeting against Arizona, and that's promising because 3 of the last 4 games of the season are going to be repeat opponents for BYU, and you saw those tactical decisions, that X's and O's background that I think a lot of people were so excited regarding the Kevin Young hire with his NBA background. That shined against Arizona. I thought some of those timeout plays were just outstanding. The way that he was drawing it up. I thought that entire week against Kansas and Arizona, Kevin Young was out coaching 2 of the better coaches in this sport in Tommy Lloyd and Bill Self. And that's just really exciting, Matt, because I think the talent's only going to continue to improve long-term with Kevin Young overseeing the program. And you're going to see an influx of talent next year with number 1 recruit A.J. DeBansa. And then you factor in the returning personnel, too, next year. This guy's doing an outstanding job. And I just think that shined through in a win at Arizona because the Wildcats, they never lose at home. And to put up 96 on
Except the BYU.
Clearly. 2009, Jimmer Fredette, who we talked to on Saturday, on Cougar Sports Saturday, and then this game over the weekend as well. So I just thought Kevin Young's background and designing plays really shine, and that's trending up in these repeat matchups.
Did I go too far in the opening segment saying he's one of the elite coaches in the conference already?
You say Bill Self, Scott Drew. I think Kelvin Sampson's probably number 1 now. And then
sure.
TJ Otzelberger's really good. But Kevin Young, I think, just has the package of he's got an ability to recruit, assemble rosters, and he's already got BYU in a position where they feel like they're a lock for the NCAA tournament right now. And that's impressive in year 1 as a first-year college basketball head coach.
Trending down for you, Mitch, what do you got?
For me, I'd say the trending down is just the defense, give up 95. Arizona.
Their shot making was ridiculous.
It was.
It was out of character.
And that second half, it was a little bit worrisome. Del Orso, he was 3 of 3 from 3.
He was 2 of 17 before he popped 3 in a row.
So defensively, that's some areas to improve on heading into this matchup against ASU, which we'll talk about more a little bit later.
For me, I hate to even bring this up, but it's the only thing I can think of. It's the only thing I could think of, Mitch. Fan behavior amongst these newcomer fan bases in the Big 12. And I'm talking Arizona. We saw it with Arizona State in football, and we've seen it in the past with road trips to USC, Oregon. I don't know what it is about these former Pac-12 teams, but it feels like it almost always comes from those universities in that geographical region. And I really like that this particular instance of the expletive and a religious term towards BYU, I like that this is getting some national run because this needs to get sniffed out. And honestly, I wish the Big 12 would do something about this. I don't know what the right punishment is, if that's even the right word to use here, but just a little apology every time. When is this going to be addressed at a higher level? Because this is just flat out unacceptable. And if it was directed at other religious universities, I think it might take on a larger life of its own. Jake Retzlaff has talked about this, where he came here and he's of the Jewish faith, and it kind of took him by surprise, and he feels like, man, if that was said about my religion, the Jewish faith, it would be a much bigger story. So I want the conference to do something about this because it's really unacceptable, and it's unfortunate that it happens so much, and I think BYU fans are almost numb to it because it's happened so much, and that's sad.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with this one is that it's a conference matchup. It's the first time BYU's experienced this where It's a program they're going to continue see every single year, so maybe there can be more lines of communication about this in ways to just get rid of this, and maybe you have to find the schools if you're the Big 12. I don't know what the exact answer is, but it's become a growing trend, that's for sure. And in the state of Arizona, there was multiple instances with football and in basketball.
Why is it a thing, though? I'm struggling to understand that.
Well, we got to get to a break. We'll have Kanon Catchings on the other side. We'll talk more about it a little bit later here on Cougar Nation.
Be ready for BYU Game Day. Download the KSL News Radio app to stream BYU games, plus breaking news during the week. That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Welcome back into Cougar Nation, live here on this Monday, February 24th. Hope all of you had a fantastic week, and how could you not, right? BYU basketball flying high after that big win over the Arizona Wildcats. We're expecting a call here soon from freshman Kanon Catchings, who's down in Arizona. Cougars are getting ready to take on the Arizona State Sun Devils on Wednesday night in Tempe. So we'll be getting to him shortly. And you can call us as well here on the program, 801-575-8255. Share your thoughts on this BYU basketball team, and was it the greatest week ever? And as we wait for Kanon Catchings' call, Matt, he had an impressive performance against Arizona, 14 points against the Wildcats. Pretty noteworthy considering he only played 2 minutes against Kansas. It shows that this whole locker room is bought in, and when their number's called, they're making the most of their opportunities.
That's something I love about this team, Mitch, is that people are willing to accept certain roles to win games, and that's honestly what it takes in college basketball to make special runs. All the best BYU teams, they've had guys who accepted certain roles, even though, yes, somewhere else maybe they could have had a bigger role, but they want to win, and this team has the makings of that DNA.
BYU took down Arizona 96-95, and I thought one of the other things that really stood out to me was just BYU's ability to knock down threes. And anytime you thought Arizona was, going to go on a run, BYU always had an answer. And I think back, Matt, to in January, you and I were at the Annex talking to BYU assistant coach Chris Burgess, and there was so much talk about finding a way to win close games. And it felt like, man, how are they going to pull this off and figure it out in the Big 12? They did it in the McHale Center, one of the toughest venues in college basketball. I just feel like, Arizona's not the best team in the sport. That's Auburn, Duke, teams like that. But, man, BYU feels like they can match up with anyone, and they've got that confidence now that if it's a close game against a good team, they can find a way to pull off a victory.
And I like the point that you made earlier. Arizona played a great game. Defense aside, Arizona's shot making and playmaking down the stretch was uncharacteristic for them. What we saw in that game, they played above their level, and BYU hung with them and got the win. That is a big deal. And I love what Bill Self said earlier in the week, that this BYU team, the way they're playing right now, they could beat about anybody in college basketball, and that is a fun thought with so few games left in the regular season. And with this team, I believe a lock for the NCAA tournament. They're playing their best ball at the right time.
It is a complete team effort for this BYU team as they're on a 4-game winning streak. They've won 8 out of their last 10. And again, we're waiting on a call from BYU freshman Kanon Catchings. And Kevin Young said when Catchings is on, it takes BYU to a completely different level as a team.
With his size and his high release, I tell him all the time, you're either going to make it or miss it. The defense has nothing to do with it. And so when he's aggressive looking for his shot, he really changes the game for us. I'm honestly really proud of Kanon. His road's been up and down, and I, quite frankly, have given him a short leash of late, and he's been able to accept it and show up and continue to work. And said this from day one with Kanon, when he's playing at that type of level, our ceiling is a lot different.
I think what's always interesting to me, too, when I listen to Kevin Young, and if you haven't, Cougar fans, I highly recommend you listen to that guy. We always upload audio on the Cougar Tracks feeds, and you can always check out his commentary, read his quotes on KSLSports.com. But he's so interesting, and he's just kind of straight to the point. He was candid about, I've been on a short leash with Kanon, but the thing is that he stayed locked in, and when he's on, it just does something different for this BYU team. And, Kevin Young's a pro's pro, and I like how that's carried over, that identity here at the college ranks, because I think it's going to serve BYU well, and we're already seeing that benefit this group right now in this winning stretch.
Yeah, and I love it when Kanon plays like this because he's got a unique offensive ability that nobody else has on the team. He can rise up and get a quality shot, and when his shot is falling like it did in that Baylor win and like it did in that second half against Arizona, it just makes everything easier offensively for BYU because in a tough moment, the ball can find Catchings, and he can get a quality shot.
BYU's in the AP Top 25, number 25 in the AP poll. Surprisingly, the college basketball coaches, they were not impressed enough. BYU just outside the coaches poll at, I guess you could say, number 26, the
Let's
first team.
Let's abolish that thing. They're busy coaching.
I agree. That thing needs to go by the wayside. It was honestly the first time I looked it up this season to see the coaches poll just to see if BYU would check in. And I was like, oh, this thing is actually still going on. I haven't checked it at all this season. But, I think that this BYU team, it's exciting times right now, Matt. And, I was thinking about, is this the greatest week in BYU basketball history? I would say that it is because, I think about just the brands, the logos. We talk so much in college sports about brands and the consumer, the fan, that bears itself out. They get excited. They spend the tickets. I mean, that Kansas game was sold out for weeks because of that brand of Kansas. And to hammer Kansas by 34 points in historic fashion, and then to follow it up in a game at Arizona where, I'll be honest, Matt, I thought BYU would be competitive. We talked about that on Saturday, previewing the game on Cougar Sports Saturday, but I really thought, okay, probably a little bit of a spot where Arizona pulls away late, but BYU's competitive and you feel good still heading down the stretch run. But to take down the Wildcats in their building, I just can't picture. I can't think of two better wins other than, the NCAA tournament. But even that NCAA tournament with Jimmer, that was an 11 seed in Gonzaga and a 14 seed in Wofford. BYU hasn't beat a single-digit seed team in the tournament since '93. It's been a minute, man. So I
But
feel
the eyes of the country were on BYU because of the storylines and because of Jimmer, and they delivered for that weekend.
The college basketball world is buzzing about BYU right now. And the thing is, too, is maybe a contender, too, for greatest week. What about A.J. DeBansa committing to BYU and signing? That's got to be in the mix, too, because that was a big deal on ESPN's First Take. You could also factor in Danny Ainge going coast to coast with Notre Dame and then taking on Ralph Sampson in Virginia in the Elite Eight, the furthest BYU has ever reached in the NCAA tournament.
But there wasn't one shining moment back then, Mitch. There wasn't Jim Nance on the call, Bill Rafferty, the Onions. It just, I don't know.
Dick Enberg back then?
Yeah, that's why I discount it a little bit, as I just feel like the microscope, in a good way, has been amplified on college sports, and so it feels bigger, it means more, but you're making a compelling case, and this is certainly on the Mount Rushmore of best weeks. There's no denying that.
And I think also, too, what makes it exciting is the potential. I remember leaving the Kansas game last year at Allen Fieldhouse, and I bring this up because in the moment it felt like, oh, man, this put Mark Pope on a national spotlight where maybe he's on, coaching radars for other jobs. Look, and I thought that BYU would
You had that thought? That Pope could be gone?
I remember talking to people at the Big 12 tournament that just, if he got an attractive offer from a bigger program, it was never going to be, he's going to leave for Washington. I remember that was a thing. But it just felt like, this might be a win that springboards him into a bigger brand job. And whereas this with Kevin Young in this group, they're not going anywhere. Kevin Young wants to be at BYU. He's been very candid that this was one of the few and only jobs he would have left the NBA for. And he's locked in on a 7-year deal, and this is where he wants to be, and he's going to be coaching the number one recruit in the country next year. So it's start of something maybe that could be a special run. And I think that's what kind of adds to the good vibes of this week for BYU, is that it could be the start of something special for the Cougars.
I also think, too, Mitch, similar to that 2020 season, there's a lot of fan cachet behind this team. We've watched Foose for 4 years. Dallin Hall's a junior. Richie Sunners is a junior. Trevin Nell's been here since 2001. That's a joke. He hasn't been here since 2001, but Trevin Knell's been here for a while. There's a lot of investment into these players, into this team, and to see them peaking at the right time, I think also adds to it because this is a fun team to root for. There's great chemistry. You feel it through the TV. You feel it at the Marriott Center, and it's really fun to get behind these guys.
Matt, let's get to the phone line and welcome in BYU freshman forward Kanon Catchings. Had a big game against the Arizona Wildcats, 14 points against Arizona. Kanon, you're with Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte here on KSL News Radio. Thanks for joining us. How fun was that win in the McHale Center on Saturday?
I mean, it was crazy. It's something you really dream about, loud arena, close game that comes down to the wire. I mean, it was just crazy to be a part of. And I'm glad that I got to help the team win.
Why do you think this team has been able to win games like the Kansas blowout and this Arizona close win? Feels like this team is surging here in February.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody's just, gotten adapted. Everybody, even in terms of just the coaches as well, like I feel like everybody's just come together and bought into what we're trying to do.
Talk with BYU freshman Kanon Catchings here on Cougar Nation on KSL News Radio. And Kanon, Coach Young talks a lot about stacking days. He pulls that from Monty Williams, a former NBA head coach. What is it about this group that no matter what your role is on a given night, you guys are always finding ways to stack days and capitalize when your number's called?
I feel like just me being consistent and my workouts and stuff, like just waking up every morning with JL, waking up Kyle, and just being able to do the same things over and over and over. I feel like it just builds repetition to the point where it doesn't really matter, what part of the game or how long I play. I feel like I can make a difference.
You're a part of a top 25 team. You're in the rankings now. What does it mean for this team to be nationally ranked?
I mean, it means a lot. It's also something, you have goals of, you dream about pretty much your whole life just leading up to this point. I mean, to just have it happen, it means a lot.
Kanon, what's the potential for this team moving forward, do you think?
I think we have still another gear to tap into, but, I mean, just keep getting better and see what happens.
What do you think this team needs to do to continue its upward trajectory towards the NCAA tournament?
Just keep coming to practice every day, trying to get better, and I just keep doing the same things that we've been doing to keep getting better.
What are you guys doing down in Arizona this week? I know that after the Arizona game, you guys stayed in the Grand Canyon State. You're in Tempe now. What have you guys been doing to pass the time to get ready for Wednesday night?
Just get in the pool, sit back and relax in warm weather because it's super cold in Utah.
It was pretty warm today, though, Kanon. So you're missing some good weather here. What was it like being at the Suns practice facility? Was it cool to be at an NBA practice venue?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy just to think about being in an NBA practice facility, just seeing all the things that they have, and hopefully be there someday practicing just regularly,
When you talk about, hoping for the NBA someday, there's been high expectations placed on you coming into this program this year. Has those expectations from the outside weighed on you at all, you feel, or do you feel like you'll be able to manage those and just still continue to focus on the task at hand?
I mean, my mom always tells me to stay, keep your feet in the ground and just worry about where you're at right now.
Kanon, thanks for the time, man. As always, we appreciate it. Enjoy the warm weather down there, and we're looking forward to the game against Arizona State.
Thanks, Kanon.
No, thank you. Thank you.
That's Kanon Catchings here on Cougar Nation on KSL News Radio. He's down there in Tempe getting ready for BYU and Arizona State as the Cougs.
Tempe haunts my dreams still after what we witnessed on that football field last November.
I have a feeling it's not going to be the sold-out electric crowd on Wednesday night for the basketball edition of BYU ASU, but that's just a hunch, Matt, I got to say. And hopefully for Kanon Catchings, he can have another big impact as he did in the win over Arizona. Cougar Nation sponsored by Central Bank, voted best bank and mortgage in Utah Valley. visit them online at cbutah.com.
Cougar fans, use this radio station tomorrow morning for important news updates. Listen to Utah's most important radio station tomorrow morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Cougar Nation, it's time to hear from you. 801-575-8255. Still got time to hop on with us and share if that was the greatest week in BYU basketball history. We appreciate Kanon Catchings from the BYU basketball team joining us on the show, and BYU's media director, basketball media director Tyson Jex for helping us out with that interview from Tempe, and Cougar Nation sponsored by Central Bank. Matt, BYU takes on Arizona State on Wednesday night, 7:30 tip here on KSL. How you feeling about this matchup with the Sun Devils, who come into the matchup after an upset win on the road at K-State?
I'm feeling great. I think BYU will win comfortably. I do want to acknowledge, though, that this is an important game because that was a huge week. You think it's the best week the program's ever had. And there's still, in my opinion, 3 games left that you have to win. And if you win those games, you might be a higher seed in the opening round. That's the opportunity at hand. And on the flip side, if you lose to Arizona State and West Virginia later in the week and then Utah to finish the season out, you're right back on the bubble, man. So there's still work to be done in terms of you got to avoid the bad loss. And Arizona State, their leading scorer, B.J. Freeman, was dismissed from the team. They are 1-7 at home in conference play. Like, you have to win that game. Now, I believe they will. I'm not worried about it. I think we do need to acknowledge it's not all. The season's not over yet, and there's still some work to be done in terms of avoiding a bad loss.
Yeah, I think this is an intriguing matchup. Arizona State is much better than their record would suggest, but what's interesting about them is that, as you noted, their leading scorer, B.J. Freeman, dismissed before the K-State game, yet they won on the road in one of their best performances of the year. But what was interesting, with about 5 minutes to go in that win at K-State, Jaden Quaintance, the 17-year-old freshman big guy who Kevin Young compared to a Draymond Green type of player heading into the first meeting back on New Year's Eve, he left the K-State game on crutches. No real details as to length of injury or what the injury is, but clearly was banged up and left that arena in Manhattan on crutches. So his availability will be a big question going into this game. So I think BYU, personnel-wise, should be able to take advantage of Arizona State. But, yeah, you got to follow this up, what you had this past week with a strong performance against ASU. And sometimes you wonder, too, with these long breaks between, Arizona and ASU. This is a Wednesday night game, the first of the season in the Big 12. If that's too long of a break. But it seemed like Kevin Young today noted that Arizona win was emotionally and physically draining, that maybe the extra day and not having to travel back to Provo will serve this team well. Hopefully that's the case for the Cougs.
I think it will be. And I also think, too, not to draw a football comparison here, but do you remember 2020 when the football season went down the can and we were talking about all these bad football games? And I think you and I said, we're going to learn a lot about this team, even though the opponents aren't great, because if you handle your business, that's a mark of a really good team. And I feel like that applies here to this Arizona State game where there's a lot of turmoil there. You mentioned the injury. We don't know about that. The leading scorer being dismissed. Go in and handle your business. And if they win by, I don't know, they just need to win, quite frankly. But if they were to win by 10 or more, you would feel even more confident that this team is continuing a upward trajectory, which could result in a special March. Good teams do that, and I think this is a really good opportunity for this team, even though the opponent is not the caliber of Kansas or Arizona. Just put a stamp down in Tempe and let everyone know that, hey, even when it's not a name brand, we're coming to play and we're going to run you out of the gym, as Kevin Young likes to say. That's the kind of opportunity at hand.
Big 12 is a really interesting league right now. Houston's head and shoulders better than everyone else. They got a 3-game lead. They're going to probably win the regular season title. Texas Tech, Arizona, BYU, Iowa State, that's your top 5, and you can put them however you want. I'd say BYU's probably in that 3 or 4 range in the league as far as best teams right now. They could, they're right there. They're playing as well as anyone in college basketball. But after the top 5, it's a lot of mediocre teams, or as my kids say, mid teams, from 6 to 16. But they're also teams that on any night could get you. And Arizona State, is one of those teams that could do that. But to your point, they have been bad at home. And, there was a game where they played Iowa State and the road fans took over from Iowa State. Ooh. I expect a large contingent of BYU fans for this one because there's a ton of BYU fans in Phoenix.
Phoenix is a much better destination to visit, by the way, than Tucson.
Yes.
So I think that'll factor in.
And also ASU doesn't sell out like the McKell Center and Arizona fans do. So I would expect a large gathering of BYU fans at this one in Tempe, and maybe BYU basketball can complete the sweep and get revenge for football losing to ASU. It'll be a big game. Again, tip-off at 7:30 Wednesday night, 6:30 pregame for BYU and Arizona State. We will have you covered on KSLSports.com. And then the Cougs go back home on Saturday to host West Virginia at 8 p.m. inside the Marriott Center for the penultimate home game of the season. So that's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Nation. Go check out our podcast. We appreciate all of you. Appreciate Kanon Catchings for joining us this week as well. We'll talk to you on Saturday on Cougar Sports Saturday and next Monday here on Cougar Nation.